Hello again, this is Brian King, ADHD Success Coach. You ever had that experience of really needing to focus on something, whether it's notes for a meeting, night before a test at school, and you just can't get your brain to engage? But then you decide to turn on some soft music in the background, and all of a sudden you feel calmer, more focused, and you're able to get the job done. Well, why does that happen? Well, maybe this isn't even something you put any thought into, because why analyze it at all? If it works, do it, right? But for those of us with scatterbrains, ADHD, Asperger's, dyslexia, the more we know our brains and the way they work, the better we can accommodate them. Now, keep in mind what I'm about to explain is my experience. Haven't read it in a book, don't know if any research has been on this. Maybe I just happen to stumble upon the correct way of interpreting it. I don't know. But if this makes sense to you, then hopefully it will guide you into accommodating yourself better. Now, let's get an overview of what the brain is supposed to do. Our brain is supposed to take all the information coming in from all of our senses and create a coherent picture of the world. So we go into an environment, there are sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and we can get one big picture of what's happening. And it's a picture that's not overwhelming, ideally. But if you have ADHD, if you have sensory processing disorder, certain aspects of that scenario may be very pleasing, while others are overwhelming. If you can't deal with the overwhelm, you have to get out of there and you miss out on the pleasing. That's a lot of what sensory processing disorder is that our senses are out of sync. They're not registering at the same intensity, and they may not be registering at the same speed. Case in point, my visual spatial and my auditory are out of sync. What comes in visually is processed much more slowly than what I hear. One of the reasons I suck at catch, because the ball is coming at me faster than I can process it, so my reaction time is too slow. So this is where this affects communication. If I'm trying to look at somebody's lips while listening to them, because their lips are coming in slower than what I'm hearing, it can confuse the conversation, because my brain will say, this doesn't match. What the heck is this person talking about? See what I mean? That incoherence, that lack of continuity, of cohesion in what's coming in makes things more confusing. So that's just to understand, that's not about the white noise part, that's just about understanding how an out-of-sync brain can make it harder to focus, because things are coming in at different rates. Now, with ADHD, all of your senses are given equal priority. So if there are sights, sounds, smells, guess what your brain does? Your brain doesn't sort and sift. It doesn't say this is important, ignore that. It gives everything equal priority. So if you're in an environment where people are talking, the TV's onto a show you don't like, and you're trying to study, you're going to be very irritable because you can't tune that stuff out. In fact, maybe you really can't tune it at all. It's just too darn hard. So what do you do about this? That's where white noise comes in. Something like listening to some quiet music in the background, which is something I did a lot through high school. My son, my oldest son who's in college now, he will play one of his movies on his iPhone very quietly in the background. Now you might think, man, a movie would be really distracting. You know, you got all that dialogue going on and so on. But he likely tunes out, and his brain tunes into the most pleasurable aspects of that movie. And this is what it boils down to. This is why white noise and things like it work. Because if you are experiencing something that your brain has learned is pleasurable, it starts releasing these little chemicals called dopamine and serotonin. Those are the pleasure chemicals. Those are what help our brain register, these are pleasurable experiences. I want to remember this. I want to associate this with pleasure every time I hear it. You know, I imagine you traveling along, you're listening to music, and there's something that reminds you of a time you were in love, something that you automatically smile at the moment it comes on the radio. That's because those chemicals are released because of that association with pleasure. Well, not only pleasure is created when dopamine and serotonin are released, those two chemicals also enhance, you ready for it, memory and focus. So when you're listening to something pleasurable in the background while you're trying to study, while you're trying to focus, while you're trying to remember things for the big test, you turn on something that creates pleasure in your mind to trigger the release of those chemicals that give you the very abilities that you were looking for. Memory and focus. Now here's what's really beautiful about it. If your brain is scattered, you're tuning into a little bit of hearing, a little bit of smelling, a little bit of touching, a little bit of seeing, and you can't really spend any time on any of those for any meaningful period of time. The more scattered you are, the more you might not even be familiar with what focus even feels like. Your brain might not even be sure what focus feels like. So even when you're trying to focus, your brain doesn't know what to do for you. So when you get those chemicals in your brain that enhance your focus, and then you take advantage of that focus, you're reading something, you're practicing something out loud, you're doing it for a prolonged period of time. Now, since all of your senses ideally are designed to work together to give you a cohesive, consistent view of the world, once you have a sense that's engaged for a prolonged period of time on focus, because your senses are supposed to work together, the rest of them get the signal that, hey, this sense is focusing now. Let's follow along. So next thing you know, your hearing comes into alignment. Maybe your thoughts slow down. Maybe the smell says, oh, there's nothing here for me to smell right now, and it tunes out. It's almost like dominoes. Once you have set focus in motion, it sends a signal to the rest of your brain saying, this is what we're supposed to do. Because before we were just scattered, we didn't know what focus was supposed to feel like, but now our vision or our hearing has shown us the way. So let's fall in line. You see this when you're hyper-focused, when you're involved in a video game or a computer game or something you really, really enjoy, and you get so soaked into it that for the first time in a long time, you're able to focus in on one thing and ignore everything else. How about that? Something that you were unable to do in your everyday, workaday life. But suddenly you can do it. Why? You've released so much dopamine and serotonin that now you can focus and you can also sort, sift, and ignore because you've brought so much pleasure. Now, I'm not saying get a button installed that you can press anytime you need a dopamine or serotonin release. I'm saying as much as possible, take control of your environment. One accommodation I know a lot of businesses are allowing these days is for you to listen to music while you're working. And because we are in the smartphone age, you can put in your earbuds or whatever it is you use and listen to your music while you're working, without disturbing the other folks around you. And that can significantly enhance your productivity because you're remembering what you did, you're able to stay focused, you're able to stay a lot more efficient because you have that natural way of releasing a chemical that helps you do that. So I imagine there's a lot more to this discussion, there always is. But this is my take on why white noise works. I have my music handy. Whenever I feel foggy and fading, I crank up the tunes. It brings up my energy level and increases my focus. And when I feel focused again, I get back to work. Automatic reboot. So I hope this has been helpful to you. If so, please comment below. Let me know how it's been helpful. If you want to problem solve this a little bit to figure out how it can work in your own life, send me a private message and we'll chat a little bit. And if there's anybody else, high school student, college student, your spouse, a friend, that you think could really benefit from this, please share it so that they can get some help too. It's great talking to you. This is Brian King. I'll see you again soon.